guys. My name is Martin Tyner. I am a master falconer. I'm an eagle falconer. I'm a rapid rehabilitator, rapid educator, rapid propagator. I was the curator of birds of prey at Busch Gardens in California for many years. I worked in the movie and television industry, trained big cats and elephants and bears and sea lions. And so animals were kind of my thing, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Southwest Wildlife Foundation. The Southwest Wildlife Foundation is our wildlife rescue center in southern Utah.
This is a transport box, what I call a hawk box. Some people call it a giant hood. I do not. I call it a hawk box. This is a hood, and that doesn't look anything like a hood. So that is not a big version of this. This is a hood. That's a hawk box. Pretty much what I'm going to do here is basically treat you as my students and try to give you just some very, very basic fundamentals. Now, please understand, my falconry is my falconry. This is the way I learned to work with the animals, and there are many, many different styles of falconry, and so people practice things very differently. And so if I have a piece of equipment, you say, well, that's not the way, so-and-so uses that piece of equipment, or it's a different kind, or made of a different material. Please forgive me, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you as my students using the equipment that I use. And as promised, I'm going to start a whole series of very short videos on what falconry is, where it came from, a little bit of its history, and quite a bit about the equipment that we use and how we use it and all of that. And so this is a good opportunity for me to take all of you and kind of treat you as my students, and let's get a little bit of education on falconry, what it is. Of course, what falconry is a very ancient form of hunting. It started more than 4,000 years ago. It started in China. Basically, 4,000 years ago, you weren't allowed to have anything if you lived in a small village could be considered a weapon, and so nothing to hunt with. And so you would have in most small villages an old guy like me who's trained in falconry, who would take his hawk or his falcon out and hunt ducks and pheasants and rabbits and squirrels and those kinds of things to bring food back to the village. And so that's kind of really where falconry got its start. Falconry is extremely complex. The rules and regulations, it's the most highly regulated field sport in the world. And so this is not an easy thing to get into. But we're going to kind of give you just little bites each week on kind of what it is and how we do it. And let's see if I can answer a bunch of questions for you. Well, the first thing that you have to understand is I've been a falconer for over 50 years. And when I started in falconry, there really weren't any real regulations that governed the sport. It was pretty much up to the local game warden. So if the game warden didn't care if you had a hawk or a falcon, nobody said a thing. And that's pretty much where I got started as a young kid and working with my local game warden. But a few years later, I was approached by the local game warden back in California, and he says, "Oh, you have to take a test to be a falconer." And I says, "Oh, okay." And so we sat down and I took the California falconry test. And it consisted of rules and regulations and knowledge about equipment and those kinds of things. Back then it wasn't that big of a deal. It's a little more difficult now. And again, when I first started, there weren't really anyone governing falconry. Nobody really cared. When I moved to Utah, and I've been in Utah for over 40 years now, this was the Falconry Proclamation. This was the set of rules. Okay, this is the set of rules that we were governed by the state of Utah. And in this is 87. Well, I got here in 1978, so about 10 years earlier than that. This was just one page, and after about 10 years, it went from one page that was writing much easier to read, much heavier writing. It was just a single page, and the rules were quite simple. Here in 1978, it's very, very fine writing, and it's 2 pages worth of rules and regulations that you have to deal with in falconry. And this basically, what you can have, what you can't have, how old you have to be, and the truth of the matter is, this is extremely overkill. Just this little piece right here is overkill for what falconry is and what we do. Let's flash forward to 2020, and here is the state falconry regulations here for 2020, and this is 17 pages of rules and regulations that we must abide by to be a falconer. And the falconry test questions you on this. And so you have to know all of the rules and all of the regulations. Again, I'm trying to make this a very short video, so we're not going to read through and go through all of this. If you want to be a falconer in Utah, you go to the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources website, click on falconry, and you can download the actual regulations that you do need to memorize. And so that's the first thing that you have to do. These birds are both state and federally protected. And so there is not only a set of state regulations, but there's a set of federal regulations as well, which is every bit as extensive. Now, if your state happens to be a cooperative state where the federal government and the state work together and the state basically administers the falconry program, then there's very little that you have to worry about with the federal regulations, because the state regulations cover the federal regulations plus the state's additional regulations. So it's combined into one. If your state is not a cooperative state with the federal government, then you do need to download the federal regulations as well and memorize both your state and your federal regulations. So this is not easy. This is very, very complicated, and we're going to go through this wonderful journey. I'm going to bring out different pieces of equipment, and I'll bring out the birds, and we'll show you how the equipment works. But pretty much what I'm going to do here is basically treat you as my students and try to give you just some very, very basic fundamentals. Now, please understand, my falconry is my falconry. This is the way I learned to work with the animals, and there are many, many different styles of falconry, and so people practice things very differently. And so if I have a piece of equipment, you say, well, that's not the way, so-and-so uses that piece of equipment, or it's a different kind, or made of a different material. Please forgive me, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you as my students using the equipment that I use. And so you can go out and you can find lots and lots of additional information, but we're going to get started on a little journey here, and I hope you guys come back. This is video number 1, just a really simple introduction to falconry. So we'll talk to you soon.